So I'm showing 4 neon pieces in the show, and also making a short performance for the opening. And I mean, what ties those works together, and what also ties a lot of my practice together, is this interest in language, specifically the way that spoken language or written language make very vivid and kind of clear pictures or propositions or questions, so that in a way you can use the work to float something, put something in people's minds, bring an idea into realization, into a place. But I also really am very interested in the ambiguity that language has. So it's both super clear and then also, in my mind, super open and complex as you kind of lean into it. So on the front of the Kunsthalle now, there's a new neon piece made specially for the show, which says songs about being free, which I like because it immediately, in one way, brings this very clear idea about freedom, singing. But then, of course, you immediately start to think, yeah, but what do you mean being free? I mean, what kind of freedom? For whom? What are we talking about here? And also, what kind of songs? So I'm interested in the sort of, this contradiction between the vividness and then this space of sort of doubt and reflection that language always brings with it. Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think obviously this is a moment where the circulation of short form, ambiguous fragments of language, it's reached a kind of epidemic proportion. And I think for me what's interesting is always that the work tries to convene a really specific set of tensions, and to raise a really specific set of questions within this sort of zone of ambiguity and complexity, that it's always pointing in a certain direction or trying to make a conversation in particular areas. So political questions, questions about who we are, what kind of choices we make, what the structures that surround us are, what the language that surrounds us is, and how it sort of both, makes our communication possible, but it also traps us. So how do we negotiate that space? I mean, mostly the sculptural work has been shown either in galleries or in public space. Often it's been, on the side of buildings or commissioned into public space, but as physical objects. Digitally, I mean,
do you move out to social media?
Yeah, I mean, I do, and like my Twitter feed is pretty much a notebook for me. Like often works that will later become a fragment of performance or even a neon, they might start that it came into my head one day and it just goes out.
It's like a visible thought life.
Yes, yeah. And I'm somebody who, like, my Twitter is always, it's some things I'm thinking, it's some things that come straight from the newspaper. Yeah. I just cut paste, but I never put context, so you're never really sure who's talking or where this is coming from, which I like a lot, Yeah.
And just
yeah, it's interesting. No, it's interesting. I mean, it feels like the space of maybe because capitalism's done what it has with language, it's really run riot with play and with a certain kind of freedom. That now, in the political sense, people are drilled down a little harder. Like, we want to know more about who's speaking and what this means and what words mean, and we demand a different kind of accountability now. So I think at the moment that feels like the tendency, the sort of super explosive fecundity of language is a little bit more like, okay, everybody's watching very carefully what that word is. It's interesting. It's also about who's speaking about whom. So I think maybe for a long time, language was used in a very loose way, and it had a lot of power. And now people are a bit more, I think, sensitive in different ways to who's wielding language, who has the right to use certain words, and who do words give power to. Feels like it's become, you know, in that way a lot more visibly contested as a kind of political space, which
is good and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it is what's happening. I think being my age, I'm 58, something like that, 56, 57, who knows. I come from another era in terms of the politics of language, so I'm sort of aware of all of that and thinking a lot about it, how it's changing. Super interesting to me always, what happens with language.